Hello, welcome to the season two, seventh episode of the Youth for Discourse podcast. We are starting right now with the topic of the housing crisis. Now, I have a few very epic, very wonderful guests here today to discuss the issue of the housing crisis. So, I just want to start by asking everyone to go around, introduce themselves, and I guess if you have any thoughts that you just want to get out like right away, from which we can jump into a broader discussion on the issue. If you want to get that out of the way in your introduction, just keep it brief. Feel free. I'll start with Hussein.
Hey, my name is Hussein. I'm a Youth for Discourse junior exec, and I would guess I would describe myself in terms of Canadian politics as center right. At least my views on the uh, housing crisis, it seems to like lean center right in terms of like solutions the Conservative Party puts forward. I think they're more effective. I think they have a better platform than the Liberals, who for the past 10 years haven't really done much and actually exacerbated the problem when it comes to the housing crisis. So yeah, that's my
Okay, cool,
position.
cool. Kohei, you want to go up next?
Hello, my name is Kohei. You'll be seeing me a lot more in the new upcoming blog section of this Use for Discourse project. I'll be excitedly writing some articles for there. For this conversation, though, I'm excited to be here for this one. As we all know, the housing crisis is a major issue, not just amongst myself looking to buy a home in the future, but amongst the voter base in general, who says that it is one of the most important topics for the upcoming election next year. So
Okay,
happy to
cool.
be
And
here.
last but not least, we have Tristan.
Hello, my name is Tristan. I'm studying psychology and urban planning. I'm with the housing crisis. I'm much more interested in the actual um, built element of it and the more municipal and provincial levels of the crisis, because I think those are the most impactful when it comes to getting houses built and stuff like that.
Okay,
So
sure. Is there anything that anyone wants to start with particularly? Like, I know the main thing Hussein you brought up, for instance, the Liberal versus Conservative Party platforms, which are more a federal question, whereas Tristan sounds like you're more interested in the provincial and municipal questions of housing. Do either of you want to start with just bring something up with regards to that, like expanding upon the
I
idea?
mean, Tristan, I'd say Tristan could go first then. I think it's also interesting talking about like urban development, urban planning, how that
Sure.
affects the housing crisis.
yeah, for sure. Um, well, what I first would like to say is with immigration, it is definitely not helping the housing crisis. But what I will say is, even if we stopped all immigration right now and like deported everyone who came in the last year, we would still have a housing crisis. We would still need to build 13 million more homes. So I think right now our focus should be actually getting houses built. Of course, with the federal government, they could also implement things um, such as like forcing councils to approve new housing developments more quickly and just more frequently in general. And I think generally, though, the federal government has a much less of an impact on the actual housing crisis than the provincial and municipal governments do, because those are the governments that are directly involved in building houses and bringing up the supply. So that's, I guess I'll just start off with that.
Do you think, I have a question, do you think that maybe lessening regulations on how houses are built on the federal level could help with the housing crisis?
Currently, the most regulation when it comes to building houses comes from the municipal level. So the biggest thing the federal government can do is say to cities is, hey, um, if you don't lessen these restrictions, we'll take away funding for other things, because the federal government itself doesn't very strictly regulates the actual how many houses are built or how houses are built. It's much more of a provincial and municipal um, government
Issue, right.
issue. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Y-
Um,
Yeah, so it's
oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's more of, yeah, so it's not only in terms of the federal powers, right? There is the impact issue, but as you two have hinted, it's also a jurisdiction issue, in which the federal levels really do not have as much of a jurisdiction as the provincial and municipal level, right? And as we've mentioned, one of the approaches that you can do is to uh, allocate or pull back funding. I'm personally not endorsing any parties. However, it has come to my attention that that is one of the uh, policies or initiatives, word you prefer, that if elected, the Conservative Party would want to implement, where they would give more funding to the uh, more local governments if they meet certain housing quotas. And you have to remember, uh, in terms of the houses being built, as mentioned earlier, they're just not getting built, right? So that also has an impact on the prices, because if if the demand is relatively the same, right? Everybody needs to live somewhere, but the supply is just not there, then that's obviously gonna expand the prices. I do have a question too, Tristan. Though you said even if we deported all immigrants, which I mean, but not that you suggested otherwise, but by the way, that is illegal. You can't
I did
you
not
can't deport.
suggest to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I said if we were to deport if no I said you said if we were to deport immigrants, which you did not advocate for. Just a fun fact for anyone listening, that is illegal. Um, if we were to deport immigrants, uh, that would we would still
We would
need what
still
you
need
said.
housing.
Yeah, sir, the number you gave was about 13 million. If it was
About 13
possible
million,
that
yeah.
if it was possible that we deported all immigrants, or we stopped immigration, we reduced it to zero from today onwards, how many houses would we need to be built? Is it still 13 million, or what's the number there?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, so we either deport all immigrants or we reduce it all to zero. How many houses would need to be built? No. How many? Sorry, no, that's what you already did answer.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
many
yeah.
houses would need to be built
So
now that at the current immigration levels, right? We don't do anything
yeah,
to the immigration levels. We keep it as it is. How does it compare to the 13 million, you hypothetical 13 million that you stated?
yeah. The hypothetical 13 million is just basically what we would need uh, by 2030 to keep up with what we are currently bringing in right now. So uh, I think the current deficit, though, is like 3 million or something like that. I'd have to check the actual numbers, but
All right.
yeah.
Yeah, essentially what I'm asking is there a substantial impact in reducing uh, immigrants to a lower number, right? And how does that compare, right? Just how would that
I
compare,
think the
essentially?
main impact of reducing immigration would be for the future. But currently, if we were to stop all immigration, we would still need to build the houses. So regarding the like, if we kept up immigration, it certainly would be have an impact on the future. Yes, for sure.
Fair
It
enough.
would worsen the crisis. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you have to understand that the future you're talking about, um, I wouldn't know. Actually, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be so sure about the future statement, because you have to remember that the immigrants who come into the country, they are of adult age, you mostly, right? And if there are kids who's coming in, it's usually because their parents are coming in as well. I'm not an expert on who's coming in to the country, but it does like it does seem on a common sense level, it does seem pretty hard for a kid on his own to come here. In which case, it would be a future problem. My point is, I'm pretty sure 99% of the immigrants coming in here are of the age to have to find a place to live. So I don't think it's that much of a future issue. You get what I'm trying to say here?
From my
Okay, no,
understanding,
I totally understand. Here's
uh,
here's the main here's the I'll let you speak first. Yeah.
from my understanding, there's a massive influx of youth from the Syrian refugee crisis in 2014 to 2016. So there's a significant amount of immigrants who are underage. I could be wrong though.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
like find out. Yeah.
So going back to your point, with the point on immigration, the main problem with the immigration right now is the distribution of where the people are immigrating to, because right now 50% of the migrants coming in are going to Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. So those are three cities. 50% of the 500,000 immigrants are going to those three cities. So it's not evenly distributed right now. And the big problem with them going to these three cities is that Vancouver is surrounded by mountains. There is no more room for them to expand out. Toronto obviously has the green belt, which is the farmland surrounding the actual city of Toronto. It's protected and it can't be built on. And Doug Ford tried to open it up to development, but there was a lot of backlash from farmers and otherwise, so that failed. And then with Montreal, Montreal is on an island, so that also straddles the amount of development that can happen there. So the big problem with is basically the distribution of immigrants right now. So one of the main solutions currently is to shift away from single family development and move towards more uh, multifamily apartment style developments within our cities. And that's currently what we're seeing as like a shift towards that, especially in places like Vancouver, which have been straddled by the mountains, of course, and have seen a big change in what they've been building. Of course, right now in Vancouver, in fact, there are more apartments, significantly more apartments being built every year as opposed to houses. So that is that's one of the
Oh,
factors to consider. Yeah.
yeah, I think just to add on to like, look, I thought about this a lot. Why the immigrants might be moving to the cities is like it's just three main factors. It's pretty simple. One, all the jobs are there. Two, most of the infrastructure is there. And three, these cities are kind of like what you think of when you go to Canada. You want to go to Toronto. You want to go to Vancouver. It's like the image of Canada. So that's kind of the reason
Exactly.
why all the immigrants are moving there. We need to like not only rebrand, we need to build up more infrastructure, and we need to create more job opportunities. And like in my personal opinion, the prairies too boost up immigration to help the prairie economy. Also, because there's a lot of animosity between like provincial leaders in the prairies between the federal government. And if you build up jobs, you build up infrastructure in the prairies with federal funding, that could help alleviate the hatred or distrust between the prairie provincial governments and the federal government.
Yeah,
All
for
right.
sure.
Well, okay, so what I'm getting though is, on the one hand, you're saying this is a future problem, but then on the other hand, you're listing a lot of factors that make it sound like it's a present problem, such as the geographical situations of the three cities that you.
Can I
Well, of course, of
elaborate on
course.
that? Yeah. When I said it was a future problem, I said regarding like if the immigration level stays at its current level or goes higher than what it currently is, which is 500,000 new permanent residents every year. But I'm saying it is it is a current problem right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned one of the possible solutions is building different kinds of living spaces, right? Switching
Exactly. Yeah.
from homes to those apartments that I see every time I drive on the highway. Um, but what that sounds to me like is you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't need to that may not need to be one in the first place. Again, I can't make a definitive claim on whether we should lower immigration or not, because I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert, right? We're just four dudes talking. But on the other hand, I know that this is a question that is increasingly being talked about amongst Canadians, right? For example, polls continuously suggest that more and more people are looking to immigration as a potential problem, and the majority of Canadians do want lower immigration. Uh, so you could say, oh, but because of the current situation, we should change the kind of homes that we're building. But wouldn't the entire problem be alleviated if you just lowered immigration? Right? Then you wouldn't have to go through the hassles of switching around the types of home you're building. That kind of solution seems like you're targeting the symptoms and then not the root of the cause. If you get what I'm going coming from.
Yeah, well, another factor is that people from smaller cities and smaller towns in Canada are moving into bigger cities as well. So it's not just international migration. There are people from towns like Timmins, Ontario, and people are moving out of those towns and into cities like Toronto. So I think it's mostly the demand is for people to move into these cities, and that I don't think that'll change that much, even if we lower the immigration levels.
Okay, but I don't think that's a great counter argument though, because here's my personal stance on immigration, right? Here's how I view immigration. If you become a citizen of the state, right? Then as a citizen, you are a citizen like the rest of other citizens. However, because you are a citizen, you should be taking priority over people who are not citizens, who are uh in the process of becoming citizens. And so you say, well, there are people from rural areas who are moving in, and that's also exacerbating the housing crisis. I don't think they should be placed on the same level of. I don't want to blame is the wrong word. Responsibility ain't that good either. But you know where I'm coming from. Like, oh, they're exacerbating the problem too. But I think they should have a level of privilege in deciding where to move around in the country, because that's part of the rights that you have as a citizen. So again, if you reduce immigration to zero or lessen the number, then how helpful would that be, uh, so that we can continue to protect the rights of the citizens already living here, such as people who want to go from rural areas to the urban areas.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for
It's
sure.
I mean, quite, yeah, like it's part of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that freedom of mobility is pretty much it's in it. So like it's much like immigrants don't have rights in immigrants have rights, but they don't have as much rights as like Canadian citizens. You can limit immigration, you can stop people from coming here, but you can't change the Constitution or Charter of Rights and Freedom to stop people from having the right to move to places they want to move to. So it just makes that more sense to limit or like entirely like cut off the immigration
Yeah,
flow from certain countries.
Yeah,
I do want to
so
go ahead.
yeah, when it comes to immigration, yeah, I just looked up the number. If we stopped all immigration, we would still need 3.5 million homes. So when it comes to changing the style of development, it's not really a matter of do we get to choose, and it's more of a matter of, well, we kind of have to at this point, because there is a large homeless crisis going on in many Canadian cities, and it's in cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. It's just not possible to continue the same style of development we've seen over the past 40 or so years.
All right. Well, I'll say two things to that. First, a response to saying, this is just a side tangent, right? It's not attacking the main point. Uh, so when I just a clarification of words, when I say immigrants, I do mean citizens as like im all when I say immigrants, right? All immigrants are citizens, but not all citizens are immigrants. And the reason why is because by becoming an immigrant, you do become a citizen. So when you say that immigrants have less of a right uh, compared to citizens from a legality perspective, no, I like citizen is a citizen under the law. So I know what you meant there, but just like a clarification that I want to make. And for Tristan, you said we don't get to choose. We're gonna have to make these developments in the anyways. That's not. I get that, right? I get that. I get that we have to make these new types of homes, switch from the family homes to the apartment homes. What I'm trying to say is, how much is the problem gonna be less of a problem if we lower immigration? I get that we have to build new developments of homes. What I'm saying is, would the problem in and of itself be less of a problem if we lower immigration? You get what I mean? The
Yeah,
type
for
of
sure.
development is a foregone conclusion at this point.
Oh
But
yeah, I agree.
so,
Also
So
that
talking about.
now
Sorry, go ahead.
the actual debate has turned into an immigration debate, which I don't think Jonathan was exactly. Well, I don't know what Jonathan was wanting, but I think yeah, this is basically a debate about immigration now, and I guess the two are linked very closely, but I think we've kind of gone off track a
If
little
you
bit
want,
here.
we can,
Yeah, just
because
to, I'd like to
you
bring
have
up
been
that.
talking about immigration for a long time, and I think that it would get sidetracked more and more if we continue talking about the issue. Um, just because it's getting now more into like philosophy surrounding like the ethics of immigration, then there's a bunch of other issues which might get um thrown in there. So, do you, would everyone be fine if we like went to a different issue of discussion? Like we could go.
Yeah,
yeah, of course.
I was actually gonna bring something
Go ahead.
up about apartments. I was gonna ask him a question. As people move into cities, the incentive for people, like especially people who have families, is to move to single family homes, like these neighborhoods. With the apartments, people don't want to be permanent renters. So like, how do you stop that? Do you just like move the jobs out of the city? I don't understand how that would work. It's just from my perspective, I don't think most people want to be permanent renters.
Yeah, well, when immigrants come to Canada, most of them start off by renting, and then in places like Toronto or Vancouver, they usually buy a condo. Like condos have been a major development in Canada, like after the like 80s, 90s. Apartment or condo style apartments really started taking off. That's basically where you actually, instead of renting, you own the units in the building, and it's kind of like having a house, except it's within a unit in an apartment building. Yeah, and there's also developments called ground level development, which is townhomes, duplexes, multiplexes, which are very similar to single family homes, except basically they're just connected to save space. And those are also another form of development that should be that we need to increase in order to deal with the housing crisis, in my opinion.
Okay,
I
well, thank you for
think
clarifying.
yeah, I think that kind of allows us to contextualize the housing crisis in the larger economic question, right? Because you say people usually start off, even if they rent, they start off by buying something small, relatively small, like a condo. I think that's what you said, and then they level up so that they can become house buyers. But then, and again, I'm not an economist, but I do have the inclination to believe that the housing crisis is exacerbated by the fact that there aren't a lot of homes being built, but it's also I think an issue with the affordability in general. So like the overall economic issues in general. Uh, you get where I'm coming from. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's becoming more expensive to live in general,
Hmm.
houses aside. And when those uh, issues apart from housing are exasperated, that's gonna circle back into when you do want to buy a house. It's harder to save if you're paying so much for other living expenses.
Yeah,
And yeah, so I just want to know your thoughts on that.
yeah. And the best way to increase affordability is to increase supply, and that's exactly what building more homes does. So that's another way of increasing affordability is to have more housing co-op developments. That's where a nonprofit builds houses, or even there you could have social housing. That's another option where the government can build homes. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to increase affordability and reduce the cost of uh, housing, and it all stems from increasing the supply.
Kind of adding on to what X was saying. X also mentioned that, I mean, Kohei also mentioned that was a multifaceted issue. What do you, besides from immigration, what do you think are some of the root causes of the rise in the prices of homes?
Sorry, could you say that last line again?
What do you think is what are some of the root causes aside from immigration for the rise in the prices of homes in the past couple of years or in the past couple of decades?
Yeah, yeah. One of the main things is how inefficiently we've built our cities, and essentially, um, if you look at most of our cities, the population density in the core is very high, but then when you go outwards and outwards, it just gets more and more spaced out in a way. And this is a problem when it comes to commuting because most of the jobs are in the downtown, and in order to get there, it's you have to be closer to the jobs, and the only way to be closer is to move closer to the core or have a fast method of transport to get there. And our cities have been built very inefficiently because having all this space between our houses means there's you need to commute more to get to work or school, and sitting in traffic and stuff like that. So um, I think another major issue with uh, affordability is the fact that our cities have been designed so inefficiently that it takes like an hour to drive to work every day because you're so far away from the downtown that um, that it's just unfeasible to.
Yeah,
There's just no
especially
other
with the
way. Yeah.
lack, yeah, especially with the lack of good public transportation in a lot of Canadian cities. It's just like there's no other way to get to the place you need to be without owning a car. And as you own a car, you become accustomed to it. You kind of, I don't want to say look down, but like you wouldn't want to use public transportation, and therefore you become these people become like a kind of like a voting block within municipal governments to stop like these taxation of cars, like for example the carbon tax, like stuff like maybe not the carbon tax, but like many other like smaller bills such as that, and it kind of like it feeds into like this self-replicating process where more people get cars to and disregard like the really bad public transportation there already is, and that creates more people who are willing to, yeah, it's like a self-replicating cycle that just makes everything worse. So I do you have any like suggestions how to solve that, or like it's a pretty big ask, but like do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. For sure. Um, I guess the best way is to just shift the public perception in general, because um, most of the people who are opposed to like new styles of development, they're boomers, like 60-year-olds who haven't known any other way. And they're also living in houses that they bought for 5 cents back in 1960 that are now worth millions. So they're very financially secure and they don't want to see any changes in the places where they're living. So they're kind of blocked it off for younger people in a way, by being so stubborn. And I think just the best way to change the cycle is to start off small, build small pockets of um, good urban development, and then once people are living there, they think, oh, well, this is nicer than over here. Why is it nicer? And then that um, kind of puts a dent in the cycle and makes us reflect. Okay, maybe we should be building our houses, our homes in a better way with more public space and more walkability and public transit and all that. So yeah.
Mhm.
I
Would you?
have a question I have a question regarding that though. So you keep mentioning supply, uh, build more houses, and build the different kinds of houses, encourage different sort of institutions to build houses. And from what I can tell, it is a legitimate option. It is a legitimate solution. But is this one of those problems where that is the only solution? There is that old adage of, don't put all your eggs in the basket.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
for
Could I actually just add on to
yeah.
something like
Well, the other way,
just because I think it's important. So um,
sure.
another solution which I often hear proposed, and maybe some of you can discuss it. About a month or two ago, at the University of Calgary, in the general food court area, there was a lot of promotion. There was a group of people who had a table up, which was attempting to advocate for rent control within the city of Calgary. And the city of Calgary, with its past housing recommendations as of September of 2023, has essentially suggested that they would, while they weren't going to implements rent control according to the recommendations which were passed by the city council, that they're certainly going to look into the possibility of doing it. They're going to do more research on the issue. So it seems to me like rent control, which hasn't really been brought up in this discussion, is a very significant aspect and a very significant part of the debate when it comes to the housing crisis today. Does anyone have any specific thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like rent control is just like the it's just like the worst policy decision ever. And I've seen it like harkened on by so many lefties, like who like think rent control is a good idea, but it just doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it's fixing the issue because it's gonna piss off like the people who are owning these buildings. They're gonna piss off the landlords, and it's not exactly like yes, it helps people like survive for the moment, but it doesn't exactly improve their condition because they're not actively building more houses. If they're just keep on pushing for rent control and not increasing the supply, like Tristan said, it's just not doing anything. It's just putting off the problem to a later date. It just doesn't make sense.
I think there's an issue with your formulation of your argument there. I can divide your argument into two sections. Number one, it pisses off the landlords, and number two, if you just focus on rent control and not the building of supply, that's not gonna solve anything. But nowhere did Jonathan say, just stick to rent control. He did say there is another solution to it, which implies that you can do both at the same time. Now, maybe there are some information that that I'm not aware of. So maybe the people at the uh, University of Calgary said that rent control should be the only solution, in which case your point would stand. But from what I'm hearing from Jonathan, at least, is that rent control could be something that could supplement the main solution of building more supply. So I think that's my rebuttal to that. And the other thing that I want to say is if it pisses off the landlords, what is the consequence of that in the context of the housing crisis, right? Would that exasperate the problem more if landlords more upset? Uh, is there any actual, detriment in regards to hurting the feelings of landlords? What's what's the main issue there?
Well, they have influence. Most landlords are pretty wealthy, so they exert more influence than like poor people. That's just kind of the fact of the world. And I wasn't necessarily replying only to what Jonathan said. I was kind of replying like to what a lot of like leftists say when like they propagate rent control. So I guess I should have been more aware of what Jonathan was saying.
All right. Well, okay. Well if people are saying rent control is the only solution, then I would definitely agree with that. Let me push back on the influence of landlords. So where does this influence of landlords come from? Do they not come? Because you said they're wealthy. I'm not an expert on the art of landlording, but I'm gonna assume that a lot of their wealth does come from the fact that there is no current rent control, which allows them to charge more money, which makes them more wealthy.
Yeah,
So
no, but like
wouldn't
there
adding rent control mitigate their influence and
no
like what influence do they have as per being wealthy, right? They're wealthy, therefore, what influence do they have, and can it be mitigated by rent control?
it's very obvious to me that wealthier people participate more in municipal council meetings. They go to city hall. They give speeches. They lobby local representatives. That's what through their wealth they can the focus less on their business and more on getting policies to make their business more successful. Like for example, if they lobby the local politician to not go ahead with rent control, then they make more money. They become wealthier, right? So it's not necessarily because it's yes, their wealth plays a part, but it's because of the situation they are in that which makes them exert influence. If that makes
Okay,
sense.
so the influence that you're talking about is things like lobbying and being on the council. Um, so from what I understand, lobbying doesn't actually directly dictate which policies are put in place. Rather, it exerts a lot of pressure amongst uh, the policymakers to enact policies that are in favor of those exerting influence. So then my question is this amount of influence reversible? Is it something that's contestable? Right? So
I
their
mean, well,
influence only works to the degree to which their policies are put in place, which means that in theory, if rent control policies are put in place, that will mitigate their influence.
no, wait. The reason they have influence, the reason they have so much influence, is because their tenants, the poor people, they don't have time to go to the city council meetings. They don't have time to lobby these local representatives. They don't have time to like. They don't have time to protest. They don't have
I
time to
get
do that
that.
because they're busy working. So that's where the influence comes from because normal people, don't have the time
Sure.
or are apathetic about it.
Okay, but that's not an argument against rent control though. That's an argument. That's not even an argument. That's more of a this is why implementing rent control is very difficult because the people who would be helped by it, suppose I don't know, I'm not an economist, so I don't know if rent control would help. But I'm saying that if they believe that it would help, here's why it's difficult. They work, they're poor, so they do not have influence. I don't think that's so I don't so to circle back to what you originally said, which is rent control is just gonna piss off the landlords. I feel like that's more of an obstacle in that prevents or makes it difficult to implement rent control as opposed to an argument against rent control. Am I making sense here?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I would agree with that, but it was
Could
just
I get
like stuff.
I'm interested to hear what Tristan had to say about the issue of rent control specifically. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, rent control is definitely an option when it comes to like the housing crisis, but at the end of the day, it we still need more supply. Um, like there, yeah, like there's still demand for rentals, and um, I don't think, yeah, I don't think rent control could be the end all be all when it comes to like really anything. Yeah. Jonathan, what are your thoughts? You haven't
Yeah,
said a
well,
single
I'm
opinion.
supposed to be moderating,
Yeah, Jonathan. What do you think on rent control?
so
Okay, I think another reason why rent control is not the best thing, or I think is a bad policy from what I've seen. But obviously, if you guys have any rebuttals, you can prove me wrong. But for starters, they reduce the after-tax rate of return on housing investment, which reduces incentive to build new units. So people, as the rent controls put in, people like these landlords, they see that they're not even going to get their money from their tenants. So why would they build more units? So I think that's another major reason why it's not the best. And again, like Tristan said, like I said earlier, it pushes off the issue to a later date if you do rent control and you don't build any other forms of housing, which ties into what I just said
Wait a minute. So let me get this straight. You're against rent control because it would lower the income for who?
for landlords.
Okay, but you do realize that according to this entire conversation, from what I gather, building more supply would also lower the housing crisis, which means increase the affordability by lowering the cost of living, which means it's also gonna lower the income for landlords. So
Yeah,
you
no,
can't
but
really.
landlords are the ones who like invest in these new projects, right? So like while in the more like optimistic
Okay.
scenario you just said, you what do you mean by okay? But the more optimistic scenario said yes that would like denigrate the landlords, but we still need them as a class of people to build more houses. They're not integral, and the government could build more houses with private corporations, public like Tristan said, like these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, but still they're like they still play a part.
So you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, the income lost by the rent control is different from the income lost by building more supply because
I don't think
the
necessarily.
landlords. Pardon?
Okay, go ahead.
The, so you're saying that there's a difference between the income lost by rent control and the income lost by building more houses because the more houses offers the landlord a alternative source of income. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, they invest in other building projects, so I guess yes, I would kind of agree with
Yeah.
that. But
Okay. So yeah, so they have more supply of houses means more places to invest,
Mhm.
right? Therefore
Yes.
compensating for the loss of income uh, initiated through the increased number of supply, right?
Uh, yeah.
Okay, but then wouldn't the increased number of supply, which would increase the opportunities to invest, just invite more people, more people looking to become landlords, which would then increase the competition amongst landlords, which would then make the income not that much of a reality amongst landlords,
Well, no, the
right?
barrier of
So
entry for becoming a landlord or becoming a real estate investor is extremely high. Like even if the affordability crisis is solved today and all these people have a lot of extra money, they're not gonna. Yes, they can invest it, but they're not going to become like these major landlords that are owning multiple rental properties or owning a couple rental properties. Barrier of entry is extremely high because the price of housing is also high. So if the price of housing does decrease, the barrier of entry is still going to be high. It's still going to be the hundreds of. I don't know what you're getting at.
is okay when you say the entry is high. Is this exclusive strata of landlords limited by a number as an only an is this amount of only an X amount of people can be landlords, or is it just difficult but anyone can still do it, in like anyone
But
can
you need a
still
lot of
in theory
capital.
do it?
They can,
You need a lot
yeah,
of
they can in theory get a loan, but they need
sure.
good credit for that.
Okay,
But
okay, sure, so you need a lot of capital. Okay, so so that means that if there are more houses to invest, that means more investment opportunities. That means that people who do not have who do not have enough capital now would have more capital when the supply increases. Is this not the case?
I guess that would be the case, but
Which
a lot of
means
people
that
look for
which
a lot of people look for
yeah,
addition like other forms of investment than just going to becoming landlords. Like there's the stock market. There's a lot of forms of investment. So and yes, people
sure.
will be incentivized, and the competition will increase, but not to like an insane amount. While there, people already have like already go towards stocks as their preferred choice of investment.
I suppose my main point that I'm trying to get at here is rent control bad because it will cut off the income of the landlords, whereas building more houses will provide opportunities for landlords. Isn't that much of an argument because both situations will be a somewhat of a as far as I can see, I'm not an economist again, as far as I can see, you know, it does have a detrimental effect on the landlords. Landlords prosper as again, you can
I
correct
would
me if
also I would also say it has
yes.
a detrimental effect on the people themselves because the money tenants give to landlords directly goes to the obtaining and the maintaining of these housing facilities. So like as people stop paying their rent, then there's no money to give to like people to repair these
I
housing facilities. So like
I
it's
feel like I feel like that's an issue once you actually have a place to live, which isn't the case at the moment. Right?
okay.
When you don't have a place to live, I don't think the living qualities of a house, oh, the elevator's been broken for 10 years, isn't that much of an issue if you don't have access
I
to a
mean, but we're
house.
talking
So
about
I
no, we're talking about current renters, right? We're not talking about like homeless people.
current no, but I'm not talking about homeless people either. Right, I'm also talking about people who still live with their parents who want a home. Right?
Okay.
If they want a home, they would much rather want a home with a broken elevator rather than, no home at all. So I don't think, in terms of if we look into context of other problems, I don't think that's much of an issue.
Continue with your gonna say something before that.
Sure. So yeah. So my main point is, rent control bad because it has a detrimental effect on the landlords. Isn't that much of an argument because again, uh, as far as I can see, increasing the supply also has a detrimental impact on the landlords. Now, this is just a theoretical conjecture, so I may not be right on this, and it could be the case that one detriment is relatively easier on the landlords than the other. But uh, um, but that is my conjecture, and if you have countering evidence to prove me wrong, I would love to hear it. The other thing that I want to say is, you brought up an interesting fact on how landlords, it's basically an investment, and they can find other places to invest, like the stocks for whatever. I'm pretty sure the majority of people who invest in stocks do not do so as a means to live, right? It's not their main job. It's more of a supplementary income. Why should landlords be any different? I don't get that, right? It's a detriment to the landlords. Okay, but these landlords, first of all, you said they're wealthy, so they wouldn't need to be landlords to begin with to able to live, right? The people who are without a home, they do need to find a place. So for them, it's not just a supplementary investment, right? It's very central to their day-to-day survivability. So I think the
So you're saying
priority is different here.
Um, yes, that could play a factor, but a lot of the people already have regular jobs, so they're not going to just drop everything and become a landlord when the bear eventually, like I said, is pretty high. They need to have a lot of capital
That's
to
exactly
invest
what I'm
in.
saying. That's what I'm saying. If so yeah, you're right. They're not going to disrupt their jobs and become a landlord. But that ties into my point of how being a detriment to the landlord may not be as too big of a sin as you're purporting it to be, because they have a main job. They have a main source of income.
Um, I guess what I would
The
say to that, yeah, yeah.
the people who are trying to have a home but can't, they have a main job, and their main job as it stands is not enough to buy a home. So I think they should be take that. I think that they should be prioritized before, uh, making landlords uncomfortable, because the discomfort of landlords, as far as I can tell, is not a complete is not as life threatening as it is to when comparing it to the fact that ordinary people can't find a place to live. Therefore, the detriment to the landlords may not be as big of a problem as they're purported to be when contextualized with other people with other more pressing matters.
Um, yeah, I guess I get.
Oh,
Jonathan, you want to say
I
something?
just thought that we should wrap up this
Um,
talk 'cause this specific like tangents about landlords has been going on for quite a while, and I think it's a pretty niche aspect of the housing crisis on the housing issue. Um, does anyone want to bring up any other major issues? I know it's been going on for a while, so if anyone has like anything else to bring up that they really want to discuss, like feel free.
Um, I know we touched on public transportation a little bit, but what do you guys think about public transport?
I think it's base. I think we need more public
Yeah.
transport.
I don't know about Alberta, but for in the province that I live, we are trying to build more public transports, which, as alluded earlier, it connects people in the city to the downtown. Right, the downtown is of course where the most jobs are congregated, right, and that allows people to buy a home in relatively cheaper areas to then have access to home. So I think that that is a worthy investment, right, to make. I know, right now I'm in Japan right now, and Japan's known for having um a lot of a lot of investment in terms of transport, right? I mean, if you look at any map of the trains here, right, it's like taking a wob of spaghetti and then just throw it on the ground, and then that would resemble all the spaghettis would resemble the train lines, and I what that allows us to do is to uh connect people who people to jobs, which actually, now that I think of it, it's kind of ironic because in Japan, nobody lives in the rural areas. We do kind of densely populate the cities, much like Canada, and I think, and maybe this is another tangent that we don't want to get into. If that's the case, we can just cut the conversation short. But how does the housing crisis fare out in other countries, right? Do you guys have any insights on other countries so we can look we can categorize the different places, right? So how does the housing crisis fare out in Western countries? How does the uh, housing crisis fare out in first world countries? How does the housing crisis fare out in ethnically homogeneous and ethnically heterogeneous countries? Are there any places that are doing a good job tackling the housing crisis? Can we look to them as a model? I think looking at the international stage, looking at how other countries are um, handling it um, is something that we could talk about. If again it's too much of a niche, we don't have to get into it. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I guess I think a good model of public transportation, or like I guess like housing in general, would be I guess more public transportation would be Europe. Because like they have extremely well connected like train lines, they have good buses lines,
It's
they
not
have
as good as
it's
ours.
very yeah, it's not as good as Japan, but like it's very easy to get to place A to point B without owning a car, and I think that we should take that as a model. I guess from like development of housing, I think a good The only one I have like a lot of like knowledge or like a little bit of knowledge about is in Ethiopia. Like for these past couple decades, have been like an economic boom in Ethiopia. There's been heavy Chinese development of like rail lines, like bus lines and just housing, urban development. There's like skyscrapers have popped up in in Addis Ababa, and like I think if we get like foreign investment, it's a kind of like a double-edged sword because in Ethiopia, the Chinese exert a lot of influence over the Ethiopian government as well as the Americans do because the Americans are also heavily investing in Ethiopia. But at the same time, you can kind of figure like millions of people have been left out of poverty and been given homes. The homeless crisis is not as bad as it used to be, and I think the foreign investment can be a way out, but it can also be a detriment. What are you guys' thoughts on that? I saw Michael just join. Is that Michael?
Hello, Sane.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna be honest. I have no idea about other countries, but yeah, it's
neither
definitely
do.
there's definitely things going on that we could model back
I
here
do think that we've
for sure.
touched.
Yeah, I
Oh,
guess.
go. You can go ahead. Then I'll.
No, I wasn't
Yeah,
finished.
I think
Go
that
ahead.
we've discussed pretty much. We went through a lot of stuff. Like we discussed um rent control, which is a very big debate. We discussed more stuff around supply of housing. We discussed the role of immigration and housing. I think we've touched upon everything. So are you all down? Are you all fine if we cut the conversation here because we've been going on for a while and we touched upon I think everything.
Yeah, okay.
For
Uh,
sure, yeah,
Sure,
why
I just
not?
made a random appearance,
Okay,
so
cool,
why
cool.
not?
In that case, yeah, I think we'll close the conversation off here. To the viewers at home who may be listening to this very informative, very epic podcast, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Have a good night.